morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. How are you guys doing today? I hope you guys are all having a great day, a great week, a great weekend, whatever time it is that you are clicking on this video. If you are new here, welcome. Thank you so much for taking a chance on someone else's perspective on this case. Hopefully you will find something that you enjoy about either my presentation or you learn something from this video and you decide to stick around and subscribe. To my current subscribers, thank you so much for your support. You have no idea how much you all mean to me. Also, I have to give a huge shout out to my members. Thank you so much. I appreciate every single one of you. Again, for those of you who are new here, hopefully you will find that I'm your cup of tea. And if not, that's okay too, because you have the ability to click out of here at any point. No hard feelings on my end. Please feel free to comment. Just remember to keep it classy. Everybody has their own opinion and they're entitled to it. So far, I think we've been doing a great job at keeping the comment section a safe space to share that opinion without people getting too insulting. You can say your opinion without insults, okay? That's just not gonna fly here, all right? So just know that you're wasting your time. So now with all of that out of the way, let's get into today's video. Okay, so we are now on part 3, episode 6, which is a continuation of the complete timeline. You guys may have noticed that I started putting shorter videos out in between, addressing some of the main questions that you guys are having about certain things that are coming up in the timeline that I don't want to take time during the timeline to talk about. So if you're not subscribed, make sure that you're subscribed with that bell icon click so that you don't miss those videos as well, because I've noticed that those videos aren't getting the views that these timeline videos are, and I don't know if that's because not many people are interested in those or if they're just missing them. Of course, all playlists for the Watts case will be in the description box of this video. Today, in this video, though, we are picking back up where we left off in part 3, episode 5. It is still August 13th, 2018, but it is now 2:09 p.m. and this video is going to go through the rest of August 13th up until Chris calls Nikki at 9:48 p.m. because they talk over the phone twice on this night. They talk at 9:48 p.m. and then they talk again at 11. And both are for about 50 minutes. So Nikki says a lot about their communication throughout this entire day. So I wanted to have that all together in the same video. We'll see how long this video is when I get to 9:48 p.m. But for now, I'm going to say that that's going to be in episode 7. Okay, so 2:09 p.m. Officer Coonrod asks Chris if he has checked upstairs yet to see if Shanann was maybe passed out somewhere. He also asks if she's diabetic.
You checked upstairs, she's not there. I just want to make sure she's not passed out somewhere. Is she diabetic?
Chris mumbles something incoherently and just seems to be wandering around in a panic. He's sweating. He can't seem to stand still in one place. Even if he is standing in one place, he's swaying from side to side. You can tell that he's freaking out. We, of course, now know why. I wonder if at the time his behavior was strange to the police. 2:10 p.m., Christina Meacham texts Chris, quote, "What is going on? Where are you? We are so worried. WTF," unquote. This is also the time that Chris goes down to the basement. He makes it appear as though that is where Dieter, the family dog, is, but when he comes back up, that's when we see that he actually lets Dieter out from his crate that is in the mudroom next to the interior garage door. So this is the second time Chris goes directly to areas that have no clear reason to anyone but him. First, it's the Lexus, and now it's the basement.
You mind if I look around? Go ahead. Good, thanks. Oh, you're fine.
Now, I originally thought that Dieter was crated in the basement, But I noticed in the footage while I was editing episode 5 that the crate is actually in the mudroom. At the time I was like, wait a minute, do they have 2 crates? And then someone commented that I was wrong, that the crate is in the mudroom because that's where Dieter is kept. So when they said that, that's when it was like ding, ding, ding. I realized that that quick basement trip was not for the dog. So what was it for then?
You mind if I look around? Go ahead. Good, thanks.
Like, was he checking to see if anyone was still down there? I don't know. I don't want to lead or anything. After letting Dieter out of his crate, Chris then takes him out to the backyard. To 11 p.m., Chris sent another staged message to Shanann saying, quote, "Where are you?" unquote. To 12 p.m., Nicole Atkinson's son, finds Shanann's phone.
Checking the house for consent.
Down your phone.
Oh.
Chris informs Officer Coonrod that all the girls' blankies are gone. They're blankets that they sleep with, and they don't leave anywhere without them.
All the girls' blankies are gone. Their blankies they sleep with, they don't leave anywhere without them.
Good.
2:13 p.m., you can hear someone say, "Her phone's here."
Her phone.
Her phone's here? Her phone's here.
Nicole Atkinson replies, "Her phone's here?" And Nicholas says, "Yeah, it's right there." And Chris says, "Wow," like as if he didn't even know it would be there. 2:14 p.m., Chris is unable to access Shanann's phone because the password has been changed.
You know her password?
And a lot of people have wondered, myself included, is this where their plan started to go downhill? When they realized that they could not access Shanann's phone. Whether they or Chris realized that he wasn't going to be able to respond to a lot of these messages and, kind of ease everybody's mind about where she was all day. There's also been a lot of chatter about this because Nicole Atkinson knew what the password was. First of all, Nicole is on the phone with several people at the same time, Cassie being one of them. Nicole says here that she doesn't know Shanann's passcode.
I don't know her passcode.
And Cassie, over the phone, tells her that it's the baby's due date.
It used to be 2385 and now it's 6 digits.
What's the baby's due date?
1/31, 19.
So, in actuality, Cassie is the one who knew Shanann's new passcode, not Nicole Atkinson. Just this minor detail has caused a ruckus among those who have the opinion that Nicole Atkinson had something to do with Shanann's disappearance. But it is not true. It is another rumor that has been running wild and untamed even after all of this time. And secondly, the reason for the new password is because Apple made an update to the iPhone that occurred over the weekend that Shanann was in Arizona. This update included the option to go from a 4-digit passcode to a 6-digit passcode. Now, Shanann was sharing a hotel room with Cassie and Nicole while this update went into effect. And you have to remember, Shanann told her friends everything at this point. She bounced every idea and thought off of them. So for them to know the passcode, or at least one of them to know it, does not surprise me at all. Nicole then, after receiving the information from Cassie, Nicole gives the baby's due date as the new code to unlock Shanann's phone, 013119, and the phone opens.
What's the baby's due date?
1/31, 19.
Immediately following, Shanann's phone begins receiving alerts from all of the phone calls and text messages from the day one by one. At 2:14 p.m., Shanann's phone logs onto the home router. Nicole Atkinson's texts are listed here in Discovery, and you can pause to read them if you'd like. 2:15 p.m., Nicole texts Shanann saying, quote, "I have the cops at your house," unquote. There is a question of why Nicole Atkinson would text this after the phone was found, but I don't think there's anything nefarious about this. That phone was just turned on, and it is possible that it was delayed from sometime before the phone was found, or even immediately before the phone was found. Also, have you ever texted somebody that they forgot their phone while you are legit holding their phone in your hand? No? I'm the only one? Okay, I'll be the only one. But seriously, it is possible that text was sent a minute before they found her phone, and it just took a while to alert because of all the other alerts from earlier in the day. Moving on. 2:17 p.m., Nicole passes her phone to Chris to talk to Sandy, Shanann's mom.
Hey.
2:19, Chris hands the phone back to Nicole. He then goes on his phone. 2:20 p.m., Chris receives a text message and sends out 2 messages. I wonder who he is texting at this point. 2:25 p.m., Chris goes into the master bedroom and retrieves Shanann's wedding ring. Chris said that it was on the nightstand on Shanann's side of the bed. Remember from episode 4, though, of the timeline, he told Troy McCoy that Shanann left her ring on the kitchen counter, right? Yeah, well, I think he just now went into the bedroom to put that ring on the nightstand. Like as not, and this is just speculation, obviously, but I'm thinking he pulled that ring off of her finger after dumping her body and just put it in his pocket. He kind of had free roam of the house at this point, and it was the perfect opportunity for him to stage the placement of this ring, and I think he took it. And that's just my opinion. But then he comes out of the bedroom with the ring on his index finger and shows Nicole Atkinson, insinuating that Shanann did leave because she was done with Chris, as he also told Troy at work that morning. 2:26 p.m., Chris texted Christina, quote, "The police are here. Call you when I know," unquote. A group text had also been created between Cassie, Christina, Nicole, Addie, and Shanann, where assorted messages of growing concern were starting to be displayed. 2:27 p.m., Chris texted Troy, quote, "Cops are here," unquote. Now, I don't know about you, this seems a bit strange to me for him to just text "cops are here." To me, that seems more like an FYI than an actual update about Shanann and the girls. You know, like, dude, cops are here, versus they're still missing, but now the cops are involved. Similar to how he texted everyone else, especially because I don't think Troy texted Chris anything yet at this point, but we'll see though. Because it just makes me think Troy didn't text him asking how things were going, and Chris just texts, "Cops are here." You know, like, just so you fucking know, the cops are here. I don't know. At 2:28 p.m., Robert, allegedly a member of Ordo Templi Orientis, calls Nicole Kessinger. They are on the phone for 3 minutes. That phone call registers in Platteville, which is where the Anadarko office is. So at 2:28 p.m., I do believe Nikki was at work. 2:30 p.m., Chris received a phone call, and I believe he says, quote, "Sorry about that, that was my mom," unquote.
Hey. I'm still talking to the officer right now. Okay, bye. I will, definitely. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. That was a mom.
2:31 p.m., Chris's personal phone logs on the home router. It's now starting to seem like his personal phone has issues staying logged onto the home router, because he's been inside holding his phone this whole entire time and using it. So why would it connect and disconnect while he's standing there? And this is a problem when we are thinking about the last few nights, where his phone was connecting to the router every few minutes at specific times. Maybe it's when he makes outgoing calls, because he is making an outgoing call at 2:31 p.m., which is the same time the router picked up his phone. But I don't know. It definitely makes it difficult to know whether or not he was in or outside of the house when these things are happening, because we're sitting here watching him in his house while his phone is connecting to the Wi-Fi randomly. This phone call is Chris calling Sarah Nudd.
Hey, Sarah, it's Chris Watt. Not too bad. Have you heard from Shane today? No, I have not. I was just, you're my last person to call. So I just, all right. I don't want to make you nervous or anything, but I'll keep you posted. No. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Asking if she has heard from Shanann today. Chris said that Sarah lives in Aurora, Colorado.
She lives around here.
She lives in Aurora.
2:35 p.m., Robert OTO, I call him Robert OTO in all of my notes, calls Nicole Kessinger again for 1 minute. She is still in Platteville at work. This Robert guy, again, this is someone we are going to be looking more into in a video all on its own. I have not forgotten about Robert. We will get into him and his connections. I want to get into it right now, but it really needs to be in its own video, and I don't want to give anything away either, especially because I haven't completed my investigation on that topic at all yet. 2:35 p.m., Chris and Officer Coonrod leave the Watts house to go over to neighbor Nate's house. As they are heading over, Detective Baumhover pulls up to the Watts home at the request of Officer Coonrod. 2:35 p.m., Chris's Apple Watch logs on to the home router, and that is weird. Again, he's leaving the house to go next door at this time. 2:38 p.m., Officer Coonrod walks into Nate's house. Chris is already there, and they are reviewing the home camera footage when Officer Coonrod walks in. Nicole Atkinson and her son Nicholas are also there. Detective Baumhover does not join them. As Officer Coonrod walks in the door, Nate is saying that there's nothing captured on his cameras. 2:39 p.m., Chris sends a text. I'm not sure who this text is to. Also at 2:39 p.m., Troy McCoy arrived at 201 State Highway 52 after driving 25 miles. He stayed for 3 minutes, and it appears that this was to respond to Chris's text. 2:39 p.m., Chris's Apple Watch logs onto the home router again, yet Chris is still at Nate's house. 2:41 p.m., Nate tells Chris that his camera will pick up anything coming from the street, this way and that way, and Chris asks, quote, even with that tree there, unquote. Nate responds, quote, oh yeah, unquote.
Oh, it'll pick up anything coming down the street this way.
You know where that tree there?
Oh yeah. Okay.
2:42 p.m., Troy texts Chris back from that cops are here text that he sent earlier. Troy tells Chris, quote, I'm sorry to hear that, man. If it gets crazy and you need a place to stay, you know you're more than welcome at my place, unquote. You can hear Troy's message come on Chris Watt's phone here while he is still at Nate's house. Here, Chris pulls his phone out to check the message that Troy just sent, and he then replies to Troy saying, quote, thanks, man, I truly appreciate it. Truly, unquote. 2:43 p.m., Troy drove for 15 minutes, a distance of 15 miles. 2:44 p.m., according to Discovery, from the recovered text on Nikki's second phone, Chris texted Nikki saying, oh my God, that is absolutely ridiculous. They would freak out. Now, he must have sent this after responding to Troy, because you don't see it on the body cam footage as a separate action. I don't know. At 2:46, Chris checks his phone. 2:47, Chris shakes Nate's hand and leaves. As soon as Chris is gone, Nate turns to Officer Coonrod and says, quote, he's not acting right, unquote. 2:53 p.m., Nicole Atkinson tells Officer Coonrod that Detective Baumhover is talking to Chris.
What's that? He's talking to him right now? Okay.
Officer Coonrod leaves to go to talk to Detective Baumhover, and the body cam cuts a minute later at 2:54 p.m. 2:57 p.m., Amanda Thayer texts Shanann, quote, hey lady, we just got back. Let's talk about this weekend, unquote. Amanda received a Do Not Disturb automated response indicating that Shanann was driving and couldn't respond, and that the message would be received when she wasn't driving anymore. Shanann's phone at this point is still in the Watts home, allegedly unattended. It is not yet in Detective Baumhover's possession. 2:58 p.m., Troy arrived at 15001 County Road 20, where he stayed for 20 minutes, according to his truck's GPS. 3 p.m., Frederick Police Department were asking Chris and Nicole Atkinson questions about where Shanann was or who she could be with. Also at 3 p.m., 750 steps were recorded on Chris's personal phone, and 650 steps were recorded on Shanann's personal phone. So does Chris now have Shanann's phone and he's walking around with it? I don't know, because you'll see later where he goes to get the phone to give it to Detective Baumhover that it seems like it was still on that ledge upstairs. We'll get there. Also, another thing that happened at 3 p.m. is that Carrie Wood, the director at Primrose School, told Agent Matthew Saylor about her conversation with Sandy, Shanann's mom, and she said that Sandy had asked if Shanann had ever ended up dropping the girls off, and Carrie Wood told her no. It was then that Shanann's mother told Carrie Wood that they were missing. 3 p.m. is also the time that Nikki said she left work. Now, allegedly, Nicole Kessinger never clocked in that day. And because there were no calls throughout the day until after 2 p.m., we don't know for sure where Nikki was all day. But she was in Platteville when the calls from Robert came in, and she did clock out from my understanding. But I do want to look more into that if I can, because allegedly she never clocked in. So we really don't know what time she got to work on that day. 3:02 p.m., Nicole Atkinson is on the phone with Sandy still and asks if Sandy wants to talk to the officer. She then hands off her phone to Officer Coonrod.
Hello?
3:06 p.m., Officer Coonrod tells Shanann's mom that they're not finding her purse. So 3:06 p.m. and they have still not found her purse yet.
We're not finding her purse.
According to Officer Coonrod. At this same time, Chris is fiddling around at his work truck doing who knows what with the passenger side door open. Nate and Nicole are just watching him, and Officer Coonrod appears to be watching him as well. 3:06 p.m., Chris's Apple Watch connects again to the home router. Something that's really strange about his Apple Watch logging on the router throughout this entire day is that, as you can see, Chris is not wearing his Apple Watch. And I think this is where a lot of the confusion lies with this detail. Why is his Apple Watch logging in and out of his home if he's not wearing it? It also wasn't listed in Discovery as being a source for any of his step activity, making it even more obvious that he was not wearing it that day. It's interesting. I don't know what's going on with that. He wasn't wearing it that day, but yet it's connecting and disconnecting from the router all day, including in the morning when he was loading up his truck. So we need to look closer into that for sure. I just did a video proving that he had an Apple Watch, that he does have one. But just because he had it doesn't mean he was wearing it. So that is something that we can look into. 3:07 p.m., Detective Baumhover comes into the garage. 3:09, Chris is back in the garage looking into the rear of the Lexus. 3:10 p.m., the body cam cuts again. 3:15 p.m., body cam comes back on. Detective Baumhover asks Chris to see Shanann's phone. Chris leads Detective Baumhover into the house through the interior garage door, and they make their way upstairs. 3:16 p.m., you can see the kitchen island as they pass by, and Shanann's purse is still not on it.
This is her.
As of 3:16 p.m., Detective Baumhover is now in full possession of Shanann's phone. Now, remember a little bit ago when her phone was recording steps And I said, we'll get to it in a second or whatever. Around 650 steps were recorded on Shanann's phone at 3 p.m. But it would appear on this body cam footage that the phone was still upstairs on that ledge in the loft area by the stairs. I don't know what that's all about. I just wanted to make a note of that because it's weird that her phone's making steps, but I'm not sure who would have had it. But he goes up there with Detective Baumhover, as you can see. So, I don't know. It's just really weird to me. 3:23 p.m., Troy turned his truck on for 1 minute. 0 distance was traveled according to his GPS. So he does turn his truck on another time for 1 minute for seemingly no reason. I did have someone commenting that works in the oil industry that says it's common for them to turn their trucks on like that throughout the day, either for air conditioning purposes or whatever. I do find 1 minute to be weird, but I mean, if you needed AC, wouldn't you want to sit in there for like 5 minutes? 3:23 p.m., Chad McNeil called Chris to ask how he was doing. Chad joked and asked something to the effect of, quote, "Did you catch the robber?" unquote. Chris replied that his family was missing. Chad offered assistance if Chris needed anything. This call was not seen on body cam. 3:24 p.m., Officer Coonrod rubs his hand over the upstairs Jack and Jill bathroom door, seeming to check for a key, but there is not a key there. Nicole Atkinson said that she found Shanann's purse when they got back from the neighbor's house. She said she found it sitting inside the office door. She told the officer, and Chris, the officer, told her to go get it. She went and got it. She said she didn't go through it, she just gave it to Chris. Chris tells Detective Baumhover that there's nothing in the bag, that he had to look through it. Her Chase card and her USA bank card was still in there, as well as her ID. So the purse must have been found a while ago, and Detective Baumhover knew about it.
Nothing that I really knew. She got the Chase and USA card still in the wallet along with the ID.
3:25 p.m., Chris opens the Jack and Jill bathroom doors. This is a bathroom the girls shared. Why was it locked? Well, one of the stories I heard about this is that it was for the safety of the girls. They would lock the bathroom at night so they couldn't mess around in the bathroom. I've heard so much about this in some of the Shanann Watts hate videos. People saying that it was cruel to keep the bathroom from the girls during the night and that this is one of the things that Shanann did that indicates abuse. It is really annoying how women can't do anything right by other women. Moms, I mean. And I'm not trying to exclude the dads when I say that. I'm just pointing out that it's a catty woman thing to do, a catty mom thing that some women just get off on. Anyway, so Chris unlocks the bathroom doors, which I will admit looks suspicious, but here is Chris's explanation for why the doors are locked.
So you normally, so you normally keep it locked? Yeah, because they would go in there, they'd be in soap. Like last time we had Vaseline everywhere. So that was not fun.
Again, as a mom, if the alleged reason for the locking of these bathroom doors is true, I totally get it, and I agree with it. That bathroom connected the girls' rooms together, and their rooms were kind of far away from the master bedroom, especially at night with a fan running in the master. It would be hard to hear if they were up to something. Little ones can get into all sorts of mischief in a bathroom, and one of the biggest concerns besides clogging the sewer pipes for me would be drowning and slipping and falling. Those are the things I would be most afraid of. If my kids were getting into the bathrooms at night, I would lock them too. They can always wake up mommy or daddy and say, I have to go potty. At this point in time, which is 3:25 p.m., Troy McCoy is still at 15001 County Road 20. Where he stayed for another 31 minutes via his GPS. Chris puts the key to the bathroom back on top of the door frame, which is in Cece's bedroom. 3:27 p.m., Nicole Atkinson can be seen leaving the kitchen area. Was this when she put Shanann's purse on the kitchen counter? Nicole is also still or again on the phone with Shanann's mom and again hands the phone over to Officer Coonrod. It is at this point that Officer Coonrod walks towards the kitchen and Shanann's purse is now on that kitchen island. 3:32 p.m., Nikki calls Jim for 6 minutes. She is in Brighton, allegedly on her way home from work. On this day, Jim was in town visiting Nikki, staying at her apartment. This phone call to Jim is the second phone call that Nikki made that day. Both outgoing calls were to Jim, and the first call was at 6:16 a.m., where her phone pinged in Frederick. During her interview, she told Detective Kobach that Jim was already at her apartment when she arrived home from work, that he is able to let himself in with the key that she gave him. Oh, you mean Chris wasn't the only man who had a key to Nikki's apartment? But that was what made him feel that she was ready to level up their relationship. It makes me question yet again how interested Nikki really was. Can you just imagine if she really didn't even want the relationship that badly? That it was really just about the power she had over Chris, or the competition she had with Shanann? Jim allegedly stayed at Nikki's place Monday and Tuesday and left some point on Wednesday, though that has changed depending on what interview you've listened to. Nikki does say that he left Monday night around 9 or 10 when he usually leaves. But either way, they were in constant contact over the phone, which I've already pointed out and we'll get into again in another video. 3:33 p.m., Chris is on his phone again. 3:36 p.m., Chris and Detective Baumhover walk out of the house. 3:37 p.m., they re-enter the house and Shanann's phone logs onto the home router. Detective Baumhover has it, so that makes sense. You can see Detective Baumhover looking at Shanann's suitcase. Don't forget the blue bag is also there next to the suitcase at this time. 3:42 p.m., both Officer Coonrod and Detective Baumhover leave the house, and so do Nicole Atkinson and her kids. 3:45 p.m., Nikki told law enforcement that was the time that she returned home from work. She said that Chris had begun texting her and told her that his family was missing. She said this was the first text he sent her about his family being missing. Chris also asked Nikki to call him. According to her interview, the text hadn't concerned her, but when he asked her to call him, that's when she became concerned. She said he texted her about 3 times. 3:46 p.m., Nicole Atkinson is leaving the Watts house, and she drives for 1 mile. According to her Life 360, this was a 3-minute journey from 3:46 to 3:50 p.m. Also at 3:46 p.m., Addie asked Chris what was happening and told him that she was so worried. Chris called her and they spoke for 6 minutes. At 3:48 p.m., Addie told the group chat, quote, "The police need to look at Chris's cell and computer." Addie is still on the phone with Chris when she texts this to the group chat. So he most likely rubbed her the wrong way too with the way he was acting. 3:50 p.m., according to Nicole Atkinson's Life 360, she sat in her car near 3778 State Highway 52 for 13 minutes until 4:03 p.m. Now, there is a gas station and a McDonald's at this location. I believe this is also where she stopped the night before after dropping Shanann off. Today, she has her 2 kids, and in my opinion, after running around all day, they hadn't eaten anything since before noon. They couldn't have. She got there at like 12:22, was it? So they definitely haven't eaten all day. She's got the little one, who everyone thought was a ghost, in the girls' playroom, but she's got her little daughter, and then she's got her 16-year-old son. So they're probably hungry. In my opinion, it's very likely that Nicole stopped at that McDonald's to get her and her kids some food. 3:56 p.m., Daniel Barr, Melissa Parrish's now husband, clocked out of work, as did Troy McCoy. Troy also said Chris was out and told everyone to have a good evening. He said Chris was out because he had not been able to clock out for himself.
Okay, that's what time I checked out. Headed out, Daniel Barr, and I checked out right there, right after Daniel Barr.
And what time was that?
So I'm guessing that was about around 3:56 p.m.
A little after 4, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe right at 4?
And Chris didn't send the message when he was leaving the field, so I put Chris is out as well.
Okay.
Everybody have a good evening.
After clocking out of work, Troy drove for 36 minutes, a distance of 26 miles according to his GPS. At 4 p.m., around 360 steps were recorded on Chris's personal phone. 150 steps were recorded on Shanann's phone at 4 p.m. Her phone is with law enforcement at this time, and it will be from now on. Also at 4 p.m., Kelly Berg said that on Monday, August 13th at around 6 p.m. her time, which is 4 p.m. Colorado time, she saw a Facebook post from Shanann's brother Frankie about Shanann and the girls being missing. She said that she called Sandy about this and was told that it was true and that the police were involved. Kelly also said Sandy told her that Chris was not acting himself while he was in North Carolina and was very standoffish while he was there. Kelly also talked about how Sandy found it strange that he would back his truck up into the driveway, that he had never done that in the past, that his truck wasn't allowed in the driveway because it leaked oil, and Shanann didn't want the oil on the driveway. So that was not something that Chris ever did before August 13th of 2018. After this phone call, Kelly texted Chris and asked what was going on. Chris responded, "We can't find Shanann or the kids at all." Kelly replied, "I saw Frankie's post when I got out of work. Her car is gone?" Chris replies, "Nope, Ever is here." I think what he meant to say was, "Nope, everything is here." And then he texts back, "It's here." Kelly replies, quote, "Oh my God, I wish I was closer to you, Chris. I'm freaking out and I can't imagine what you are going through," unquote. Also, at 4 p.m., Frederick Police Department were checking the neighbors' security cameras and questioning neighbors. While all of this was going on, Nikki said that she stepped out onto her back patio and called Chris. Allegedly, she went outside to call him because Jim didn't know anything about Chris, and she was still keeping their relationship a secret. Well, we can get more into that too, because her phone records suggest otherwise, in my opinion. And most of you, if you've been watching this whole series, you know what I'm talking about. They knew about each other. Nikki went on to say that the phone call was short and that Chris had been texting him about his family being gone and that the police and Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson were there, that Nicole Atkinson had called the police. Nikki said that Chris told her he was upset and the cops were searching his house. But the police and Nicole Atkinson had left the Watts home at 3:42 p.m. They weren't still there. So it may be that this call happened earlier when Chris was not captured on body cam. You know, he was kind of walking all over the house at times by himself. Or the call was after 4:19 p.m. when the second set of officers came to search the house, which is actually what I think. 4:03 p.m., Nicole Atkinson leaves the area by the McDonald's and drives the rest of the way to her home in Firestone, arriving home at 4:14 p.m., a 10-minute drive according to Life 360. 4:07 p.m., Nick Thayer texts Chris about their run. Chris and Nick Thayer were running buddies, for those who didn't know that yet. Nick is Shanann's friend Amanda Thayer's husband. Chris tells Nick the situation and they have a short back and forth, and Nick offers to come up and bring food for him. You can pause to read this. 4:09 p.m., Cassie calls Amanda Thayer and gets her up to speed on what's been going on all day. They proceeded to share thoughts and ideas about what could be going on and where Shanann and her girls could be. 4:14 p.m., Nicole Atkinson arrives home. She doesn't stay there though. She immediately drives back towards the Watts home. She gets there in 10 minutes, according to her Life 360. In an interview, she tells law enforcement that she drove back to give Nate the neighbor Sandy and Frank's phone numbers, likely for the obvious reasons, in my opinion. Nate was the next door neighbor. He was nosy. He was all up in the business. He was undoubtedly going to be keeping an eye on the house at this point, and Shanann's parents trusted him more at this point than Chris for information. Also, remember, Sandy and Frank lived there with Shanann and Chris for a while after Cece was born. They also knew Nate in person. So I don't find this strange. I think Nicole got her kids some food, dropped them off at home, and was likely on the phone with Sandy at some point, and Sandy was like, "Can you give Nate my number? So just in case." And Nicole's like, "Shit, I'm not there anymore. So yeah, let me run back and I'll give Nate your guy's number." So that's just speculation, but that's what it would appear to me. That would be the most rational thing to think happened. 4:17 p.m., Nicole Atkinson called Amanda Thayer to discuss the situation. 4:19 p.m., Officer James arrived at the Watts home at the request of Officer Coonrod. He is briefed on the possible missing persons case by Officer Coonrod, and when Officer James arrives, Chris is standing outside by his truck. They speak as Chris shakes up a Thrive shake, and Officer James tells Chris that he is waiting for his sergeant to get there. His sergeant will have a consent form for Chris to sign, which would allow them to search the house. Chris agrees to this request. 4:22 p.m., Kelly Burke texts Chris asking what the police said. Chris texted back, quote, "They will file missing persons report in the AM if we don't hear from her," unquote. Kelly replied, quote, "Was there any sign of the house being broken into?" unquote. Chris said, quote, "Not at all," unquote. 4:25 p.m., Nicole Atkinson arrives back in the vicinity of the Watts house. She stays there for just 8 minutes. You can see her here on body cam. She appears to be coming from the direction of Nate's house and slowly passes by Chris and the officer. She doesn't stop and she doesn't speak to Chris or the officer. 4:25 p.m., Chris's Apple Watch logs back into the home router. Again, this is really weird because Chris is outside, as we can see, still not wearing his Apple Watch. Is it in his pocket? And if so, why? 4:26 p.m., Kelly continues to text Chris, asking if Shanann was awake when he left this morning. Chris told her, quote, "I talked to her early this morning between 4 and 5 a.m. I think she went back to sleep afterward. She was still here when I left. Kids still sleeping," unquote. Kelly replied, quote, "The girls were supposed to have school today. I'm sorry I'm asking so many questions. I'm just scared," unquote. Chris replied, "It's okay, I'm scared too." Kelly replies, and you can pause to read this, but she asks if Chris called any of the local hospitals. 4:28 p.m., Chris's Apple Watch connects again to the home router. And this was really bothering me, you guys. So I finally just paused and stopped what I was doing, and I did a little bit of a search. I may or may not make a video about it after this one, but and before episode 7. If you guys have more questions about it, I'll just be checking the comment section about that. But I did find something else about the Apple Watch connecting and disconnecting from the home router without him wearing it. 4:30 p.m., Shanann's iPad logs on to the home router. Also at 4:30 p.m., Ronnie Watts, Chris's dad, said that Chris called him and said something is going on. Shanann and the girls are missing, all gone. He said she left her car, purse, phone, everything. And he told Ronnie that he told Shanann about, quote, "the girl," unquote. Ronnie said Chris told him what happened that morning. He said Chris told him he wanted a separation and to sell the house. He also said Chris told Shanann about, quote, "the girl," unquote, which I take to mean Nicole Kessinger. Ronnie also said that he knew about the marital issues, that Chris had told his family about it while he was in North Carolina visiting that first week of August. And this is just my opinion, but I also believed that at least Ronnie knew that Chris was having an affair. I don't know if he knew any more details about it. Ronnie was not just Chris's dad. They were best friends. And I have a gut feeling that Chris needed to confide his affair with someone. I mean, you're keeping this major secret. Plus, he was like head over heels, like in love with her, obsessed with her, whatever with her. And to not say anything to anyone, to not have anyone to talk to about that. And if he were to talk to anyone, it would be his dad. His dad would have kept his secret. His dad would have been able to help guide him. I just feel like he needed to confide his affair with someone. And he knew that his dad would be there for it. He would be supportive and give him sound advice. That is just my opinion, of course. 4:33 p.m., Nicole Atkinson leaves the Watts area and drives to near 5988 East I-25 Frontage Road, Dacono, Colorado, according to her Life 360. 4:33 p.m., Troy arrives home and he stays there for 13 hours and 33 minutes via his GPS. 4:37 p.m., Chris is standing near his work truck still texting Kelly Burke when officers return to begin searching his house. I am assuming he has been told not to go inside until after the search is complete. 4:38 p.m., officers enter the house to begin the search. 4:40 p.m., you can hear Chris state that he got alerts on his phone that someone had triggered his doorbell cam at 12:10 and 12:02 p.m.
What's that?
Just when her friends were here.
Does it only record when the doorbell rings or anytime
If
someone...
you're like right here, it should just start, the proximity should hit up.
Anything on that today?
Just her friends.
And what time was that?
12:10 and about 10 minutes afternoon.
He says 12:10 and probably about 2 minutes after noon. He stutters here, making it hard to catch. He's also making sure that they know that these alerts were Shanann's friends. But we already know that according to Nicole Atkinson's Life 360, she was not at the Watts house until after 12:20 p.m. I believe Chris got that alert. We just did this in episode 5. I can't remember if it's 22 or 28, but it was after 12:20 that Nicole Atkinson actually arrived at the Watts house. Chris texts Kelly saying the cops are there right now and they are searching the house and that he'll call the hospitals. Kelly asked Chris, was that you just on her Facebook? Chris said the cops have her phone. But I do want to mention that Shanann's iPad had just connected to the home router just a little bit ago. So I am wondering if Chris had checked Shanann's Facebook from her iPad. Remember, he deleted his Facebook, so it would have been easier for him to just power up the iPad, which was probably already logged in to Shanann's Facebook account. That's just a little speculation. Of course, it also just as easily could have been Detective Baumhover going through her phone. Kelly asks, what are the police saying? Chris said, not sure, they just searched the place up and down. Kelly asked, how did you know something was wrong? Chris told her that Shanann hadn't answered any of his calls or texts or anyone else's that whole day. Chris's dang Apple Watch logged into that home router yet again. 4:42 p.m., Nicole Atkinson arrives at that location in Dacono off Frontage Road. She is there for 10 minutes via her Life 360. There isn't anything in this area. My guess is that she pulled over to text or talk to someone about what was going on. She had just allegedly left Nate's house where she gave him Shanann's parents' phone numbers. It's possible she pulled over to communicate with Sandy what she and Nate said to each other. I mean, I don't know. It's just a guess. 4:48 p.m., Getman called Nicole Kessinger and held a 4-minute conversation. Who is Getman? Shit, I was going to look that up before I recorded and I forgot. 4:53 p.m., Nicole leaves the area off of Frontage Road and proceeds to drive home. This was a 3-mile trip that took 2 minutes via Life 360. Oh, another thing I wanted to say. That area off Frontage Road, that's the same area that unidentified white truck was sitting between like midnight and 1 on the night of the murders. Virginia Kinch called in about a white truck. There must be like a little pull-off there right before you get on the highway off of I-25, which is also called Frontage Road. Obviously, we're going to get into that in a different video, but I did want to bring that up because the area is like the same. 4:55 p.m., Nicole Atkinson arrives home and stays there for 2 hours and 58 minutes. 5 p.m., about 1,450 steps were recorded on Chris's phone. 5:01 p.m., Nikki left Chris a voicemail and her phone registered in Thornton. Now, ironically, this is the same time that Officer James asks Chris if Shanann would have left with a female friend or a male friend. And Chris replies that he wouldn't put anything by it right now, which I take to mean that he wouldn't put anything past her at this point.
Female friend or a male friend?
Honestly, I'm not going to put anything by it right now.
Alright.
I just think it's extremely ironic because he's getting a phone call from his mistress as the officer is basically implying could she have left with another man. Chris silences that call. 5:02 p.m., Nikki calls Chris again. This time we don't hear the phone ring, but he picks up and tells her, quote, "Hey, hold on 1 second, let me call you back. All right, bye."
Hey, hold on one second. Call you back.
5:04 p.m., Chris received another call, but didn't answer it.
Not sure what you would have used that way. Sorry, my phone's just blowing up.
5:05 p.m., Chris called Chase Bank, and he then called a different Chase Bank number right after, and both calls were about 2 to 2.5 minutes long. They were to hear the most recent transactions on the account. After Chase Bank, he then calls USAA Bank to listen to all of the most recent transactions on that account.
Chase is a taxi cab and limousine company for $15.42.
When?
August 12th. August 13th, 27 bucks at Target.
He tells the officer the most recent on the Chase card is a taxi cab and limousine company for $15.33 on August 12th. That is likely the cab company that took her and Nicole Atkinson to the airport the day before. There is also a Target charge for $27 that posted on August 13th. And we kind of went over these transaction postings in a prior video when I was listing off Chris's transactions. And I'm sure that most of you have noticed in your own bank account that you can spend money on your debit card and it not post until a day or two later. Certain companies are faster about it than others. So this certainly doesn't mean that anyone used that card at Target on the 13th. My guess is that the Target transaction was from Chris purchasing the birthday gift for the Lindstrom's party that was the day before, because Chris did go to Target with the girls for that reason. 5:26 p.m., Taylor, another one of Shanann's friends, texts Shanann asking if she and the girls are okay. 5:28 p.m., police leave the Watts house. 5:30 p.m., Chris makes an unanswered call to Nikki. This call was not listed in Nikki's phone history. 5:47 p.m., Chris texted Ann Meadows, and you can pause to read these in full, but basically Chris thanks Ann for helping them out with the house stuff. Little does Chris know, but Ann has already seen the Facebook post that Shanann and the girls are missing. But she asks about the comparable house up the street, and he said that he had just driven by it, which is a lie. He's acting as though everything is normal, and they both know it's not. And because Chris didn't say anything about it, Ann then asked if Shanann is okay. She noticed that it was abnormal for Shanann to not weigh in all day. And this is when Chris tells her what has really been going on. After hearing that the police were involved, Ann had to be shaking her head and wondering what the hell Chris was thinking, still carrying on with the house stuff when his wife and children were missing. That's of course just speculation. He even asks her for prayers. 6 p.m., following the suggestion of many others, Chris begins to call hospitals. In less than 4 minutes, Chris called Good Samaritan Medical Center, St. Anthony, North Health Campus, Longmont United Hospital, and UC Health. The average duration of these calls was just 40 seconds. The longest call was 69 seconds. Out of curiosity about how long these calls should have taken, an officer called St. Anthony's and gave them a name to check to see if they were a patient there. He did not identify himself as law enforcement. He's just calling as a random person, checking to see if there was someone brought in by the name that he gave. That phone call took 2 minutes to get an answer. The officer speculated that Chris just called all of these hospitals in order to create a digital trail that he called them. The officer believed that Chris never actually spoke with anyone. Likely he just called, sat on the phone listening to the recording, never pressed a button to speak to anyone, and hung up. At 6 p.m., Chris clocked about 500 steps on his phone. This is also the time that Nick and Amanda Thayer arrived at Chris's house. They said that they arrived between 6 and 6:30 p.m. Nick said that when Chris opened the door, it wasn't Chris. He said Chris appeared different, overwhelmed, not himself. Like, what is going on? At this point in time, the police are gone. Nick and Amanda stood in the front entryway by the front door with Chris asking questions about what happened. Nick said he didn't remember what specific questions they asked, but Chris told them that he and Shanann had been having marital issues. Amanda said that Shanann had told her about them. Chris said that morning he told Shanann that he wanted to separate. He said he told her in person because he didn't want to do it by text or phone. He said he then left for work. Nick said that Chris did not comment on how or what Shanann was doing when Chris left. Lauren Arnold said that she drove over to the Watts home at about 5 p.m. to see what was going on. Now, she said 5 p.m., but she also said that when she got there, Amanda and Nick Thayer were there. So she had to have left for the Watts home at 6 p.m., not 5 p.m., because at 5 p.m., the police were still at the house and Nick and Amanda Thayer were not. They hadn't gotten to the house until between 6 and 6:30 p.m., so that's likely around the time Lauren got there as well. When Chris is questioned, he tells law enforcement that he is aware that Nicole Atkinson was parked outside his house when the officers came back to search the house, and we know that because we've seen the body cam footage of Nicole Atkinson driving past. That was when she was allegedly there to give Nate the phone numbers for Sandy and Frank. You want to know what I think? I think that in regard to Nicole Atkinson, I think that a lot of her actions were being delegated by Sandy, Shanann's mom. I mean, I can only speculate, obviously, but as a mom, I would have been completely insane that I couldn't be there physically myself at the house. Nicole Atkinson was the one Sandy was closest to of Shanann's friends. They used to work together, and I think she was asking Nicole to kind of look out and see what was going on at the house. Again, that's just speculation. Some look at Nicole Atkinson's behavior as strange, but if you take all of the things that we do know for certain, it's not strange at all. Not in my opinion, at least. 6:22 p.m., Kelly Burke texted Chris asking if there was any news. Chris said nothing at all. Kelly said no luck at hospitals, obviously. Chris responded no luck at all. Kelly then asked about the cameras and brings up Frankie. Chris responds, telling her nothing on any cameras. Kelly asked if the house was locked. Chris responded that the garage wasn't. Kelly replied, and the cops found nothing. Chris replied, nothing at all. Kelly then asked, is the garage normally locked? Chris said, mostly, unless someone leaves. Lauren Arnold said that she left the Watts house at 5:30 p.m., but she had to have been an hour off like we discussed earlier because her account of who was there when she was is off by an hour. So it's more likely Lauren left at 6:30 p.m. and not 5:30 p.m. 6:48 p.m., Addie Maloney texted Chris, any news? I am beside myself. Chris replied, quote, cops searched my house up and down. They are doing everything they can, unquote. Addie replied, quote, oh my God, what could be happening, unquote. Chris replied, quote, I have no clue, unquote. Addie replied, quote, have you checked with that row of houses behind yours to see if anyone has seen her, unquote. Chris responded, quote, no sense at all. Most of them are not sold yet. They're empty, unquote. Addie replied, quote, so she wouldn't have gone out that way. When did she tell you she was going to her friends, unquote. Chris responds, quote, when we talked this morning. It was between 4 and 5 a.m. When I left, she was still here though, unquote. Addie replied, quote, I'm sorry for so many questions. I'm sure you're being bombarded with questions. I'm just so worried. She wouldn't leave without the kids' car seats. Do you have an alarm? Unquote. Chris responded, quote, it's okay. Yeah, we checked my camera and the neighbor's camera, unquote. 6:52 p.m., Chris texted Samantha Paisley, quote, I'm praying so hard. I'm sick to my stomach. Cops searched the house up and down and drilled me pretty hard. I have no idea where they could be, unquote. Sam asked why the police were, quote unquote, drilling him. At 7 p.m., Chris received a calendar notification titled Dinner with Shanann. Shanann had a similar entry titled Dinner with Chris, but it was scheduled for an hour later. And I have to wonder when they planned this dinner. I can only assume it was to have a talk about everything that was going on and kind of get feelings out on the table. Around 40 steps were recorded on Chris's work phone at 7 p.m. and 380 steps were recorded on Chris's personal phone. So I know he was kind of going through texts on his work phone. People from work were starting to message asking questions, so that's not strange to me that there were steps recorded on his work phone. 7:35 p.m., Chris's personal phone logged onto the home router. 7:54 p.m., Nicole Atkinson drives for 1 mile, a 5-minute trip according to Life 360. 7:55 p.m., Troy texts Chris asking if he's heard anything. Quote, "I know you're going through a lot. I'm praying for you, man." Unquote. Chris responded, "No news, man. Police searched the entire house." Unquote. David Colon is a friend of Chris's, and according to Dave, Chris called him around 9 p.m. and told him about what was currently going on. Chris told Dave that he went to work and that Shanann and the girls went missing after that. Dave said that Chris told him that Shanann left her personal items, including keys, at the residence. At 9 p.m., Luke Eppel texted Chris to check in and learn if there was any news. Luke said Chris called him back immediately and said his wife and daughters were still gone and the police had searched his house and vehicles with a warrant. At 9:12 p.m., a line at the Frederick Police Department called Chris and held a 6-minute conversation. According to Officer James, he called to see if Chris had heard anything. Chris also provided phone numbers for more friends of Shanann's that he hadn't previously given law enforcement. These friends were Addie Maloney, Samantha Paisley, Christina Meacham, Jeremy Lindstrom, and Cindy Jurassic. At 9:14 p.m., Kelly Burke texted Chris again, quote, "How are you doing?" Unquote. Chris responded, "Hanging in there, staying busy." Kelly replied, "I can't sleep." Chris replied, "I don't think I will be able to either." Kelly said, "I'm praying really hard, Chris." Chris responded, "Me too." At 9:30 p.m., David Colon walked over to the Watts residence to speak with and be there for Chris. Dave said that Chris was the only person there when he arrived. He said Chris was keeping himself busy by doing housework. Dave said that the carpets were freshly vacuumed. He said he stayed at the Watts house for about an hour. He said Chris told him about the struggling in their marriage. Chris told him that Shanann went with the girls to North Carolina as a trial run separation to see how it went. Oh, really? Well, this would be the first and only time I have heard that the North Carolina trip referred to as a trial separation. How about you? Chris also told Dave that when she got back, they tried to work things out, but then this morning they got into an argument. David said while he was there, Chris got a phone call. He thinks it was Chris's mom. Dave said Jeremy Lindstrom arrived a short time later. 9:32 p.m., Addie texted Chris asking how he was holding up. He said, quote, "Hanging in there. Some of my friends stopped by to keep me company." Oh, poor Chris. I'm so glad to know that you're feeling comforted during this scary time when your wife and children are legit missing. I mean, Addie must have been feeling just as irritated. Well, obviously she was probably 1,000 times more irritated. She brings up Cece's medicine and says, quote, "I'm so worried about her," unquote. 9:33 p.m., Nick and Amanda Thayer text Chris that they had stopped at the gas station and the McDonald's on 52, the same one that Nicole Atkinson is always around, to see if anyone saw anything. 9:43 p.m., Chris replied, "Thanks, man." Now, this is where we're going to stop today's video. I wanted to go all the way through midnight, but at 9:48 p.m., Chris calls Nikki, and they're on the phone for 50 minutes. And this is the first time that they're actually having a real chance to talk all day. So, what did they discuss? According to Nikki, the entire day of Monday, August 13th, 2018, they had a lot of communication. And I want to get into all of that in the next video. So the next video is going to start at 9:48 p.m. and it's going to continue into August 14th. We're going to go through the phone tag that was played in the middle of the night. So there was a lot that was going on in the wee hours of the 14th. And that's what we'll be getting into in the next video. And we'll see how far into the timeline we can get off of that. I may or may not put out a video in between this. I've had some people asking me to put out videos that are not the Watts case, going over separate cases, so that I have two things going on, but we'll see, because this is really taking up a lot of my time. Again, I apologize for how long it takes me to get these videos out, but I am so I don't want to put stuff out without verifying it. and I want to verify it, because once it's verified, we can leave it alone, or you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, your weekend, whenever it is that you're listening to this. Please be safe, be happy, be healthy, and most of all, be unapologetically you. Bye-bye.